Thanks for joining us tonight for the Artist Talks. My name is Rachel Bosenberg. I'm the Associate Curator here at the Anchorage Museum. And we are going to hear from 3 of the artists who are featured in the 2025 Alaska Triennial. Oh, I should have checked. Are we rolling? Awesome. We will be hearing from Addie Studebaker, Grace Choi, and Kerry. Each of them will speak for about 10 minutes. We'll have time for a Q&A. So think of questions, ask them while we're standing next to the artwork. And I'm hoping that we'll be done by 6:30, if not a little bit earlier. So a bit about the Triennial first. I know some of you have heard this already, so bear with me as I repeat it a little bit. The Triennial is part of this ongoing series that we have done in one form or another over the last 30 years here at the Anchorage Museum. It is an open call for artists across Alaska to submit artwork that they've made over the last 2 or 3 years. And this year we returned to a juried format. And we have Mary Bradshaw, who is the Director of Visual Art at the Yukon Art Center in Whitehorse, Canada, as the juror. She looked at submissions from 222 artists with over 500 pieces of art, and she narrowed it down to 48 artists, which are featured in this exhibition. Mary said as she was reviewing it that she was really struck by the range of mediums that artists are working in Alaska, which is cool to hear. You know, it's fun to see that we have such a robust artistic community in the state. And the pieces that she chose ultimately really focused on place and landscapes in unexpected or unusual ways. And I'm very excited that Addie, who we'll hear from first, did this piece, which is called Glitter Path, and it is a very abstract, unusual view of a landscape. I will pass it over to Addie now. I also want to mention that we are recording this. If anyone is uncomfortable with that, just stay behind. You do not need to be in it. But part of that is making sure that the exhibition is accessible to folks across the state who aren't able to join us here tonight. So, Addie, over to you.
Thanks. Should I kind of stand over here? Does it matter?
Yes, however you want. It's mostly, I know this seems like it's such a major moment, but people can come in and be around it. It's not precious in any way. But definitely do feel free to stand next to your art.
Is there something there too, or no?
No. You can do it on the floor.
On the floor, all right. Hi, thank you for being here tonight, 5:30 on a Wednesday. It feels kind of strange to be in this lighting at 5:30 on a Wednesday. I just want to break out my pregnant lady dance moves. So, but yeah, thanks for being here. I grew up in rural Ohio. I live in a rural area, Matsu Valley, and so, you know, we don't take these opportunities for granted. They're a little bit rare here. So thanks for inviting me, and I'll tell you a little bit about me. So I am a practicing artist. I work in paper sculpture mostly. I do some installation work as well. I also teach with the University of Alaska. So I teach writing and English, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, sort of the crossover with art. But as far as my background, so yes, I grew up in rural Ohio. My bachelor's degree is actually in political science, and I had wanted to work in kind of government and politics. I actually interned at the Assembly in Wales, the governing body in Wales, and then I came back and worked for a lawyer and decided those paths were not for me. I ended up going into linguistics. I come from a family, a big blended family of a lot of different kind of economic backgrounds and different language backgrounds. And I think with linguistics, I was really interested in sort of understanding the bridge between those gaps and our understanding of each other. So linguistics was fun. I quickly learned that the only way that you make money in linguistics is through teaching. I taught a little bit in Japan and then in China, in Wuhan, of all places, and came back and taught at different universities in the United States, which is kind of what I do now. So as far as art goes, you know, I had always had an interest in the arts. They were kind of my hobby and solace growing up. My family was very much into kind of medicine and science, so it didn't really feel like a viable career path. It wasn't something I considered doing seriously at all. You know, in the Midwest, we're very practical. We're all about casseroles and, you know, kind of working hard, keeping your nose to the grindstone. So that's what I did. I focused on my career in teaching, and then I kept art as sort of this sort of sacred solace, right? I didn't really want to commodify it. I didn't really want to put it out there or anything like that. So let's see. So my last teaching university gig was at Duke University, and then we left and moved to Alaska, and I was kind of in of questioning, what am I doing exactly in this career? And we had a young family, so it was sort of navigating that void with identity and kids, and how do you balance career and kids and all of those things. And again, I turned to art as sort of my solace, right? And I was a freelance writer during that time a little bit too. And all those things kind of wove themselves together, the writing, the art making, and then exploring a new place, Alaska. So all of those things sort of led to me becoming really a practicing artist by 2018-19. Started selling work, started taking on commissions and exhibiting work, all of those things. And as far as paper, it was kind of interesting how I got into paper sculpture. So I never feel like I'm fully committed to any specific medium. I like to explore. But with paper, I think there were a couple of things going on. First of all, with young children, it was really kind of a practical decision to not have paint and ceramics out. It takes a lot of effort to put it away, it takes up a lot of space. So when the kids were young, it was just really easy for me to sort of get this out and manipulate it together and learn about the materials together. So that was sort of the impetus with paper. But the other thing that I found with paper was that it was just everywhere. There was paper everywhere. If anybody's worked like in an office setting, right? That you go to like a copy room and see stacks of extra paper that were just left there. When I would teach, you go to my classes, the tables were just like littered with handouts that students, these handouts that teachers had spent hours on, just left there. So much paper waste. And then the same, with kids, it's like you're navigating these cycles of clothing and toys. And so this idea of waste is like, how could I use what was in front of me? And there was just so much of it, right? And then as far as, paper, I like of course, the tactile element, but also just working with the light and the shadows. You can see kind of the cool shadows that are showing up, even just something as flat as this, right? And so that was really informed by the kids as well. I was excited to see what delighted and excited them when we get flashlights out. And also, in Alaska, I feel like we're all so affected by the light here. We're sort of counting the minutes now, right, of the light coming back. We talk about sundogs. We look at sort of the mountain, sort of the outlines of the mountains as if they're like city skyscapes, right? And then the thing that's really exciting is when you're driving and you see how the clouds or the weather had reshaped those outlines. So just these kind of, all of these things were sort of tumbling in my mind as I got into paper sculpture. I did want to pass around a few things. Again, I like to let you kind of manipulate things and see what it is that I like so much about it. So feel free to touch these. These were just kind of studies that I had done. And they're sort of modular pieces, so when you put them together, they kind of make like a flowing fading of color. But it's also that element of sound. It's that element of being able to touch it. It's that element of being able to bend the pieces and bend them back. So those kind of things really appeal to me about working with paper. And again, these were papers that were gifted to me, so it was kind of like, I have way too much of this stuff, here, take it, right? And I get that a lot, and that kind of comes up with the sculpture as well. So, let's see, what else? So, yeah, as far as paper goes, I sort of had this shift sort of post-COVID. I think a lot of us did after all the events of 2020. And I sort of had this desire to be a little bit more out in the community. And so I started applying for different grants and things, different projects. And I took on or I applied for a grant and received this grant to make a small, tiny gallery in Palmer. And it was made of repurposed materials. I got to build it myself, install it myself, and then started working at installation. So different projects where people could come in. And again, I like this idea of people being able to really interact with the art and sort of access their own power and creativity with the pieces. So installation really appealed to me. And so the next thing that I took on were these sound panel projects, and I'll pass these around as well. So these are kind of a felt composite floor. And so what we did with these, it started with an animal hospital in Palmer, and you can imagine sort of, if you look up, you can kind of, these are things we don't really notice so much, but there's all this thought that goes into architecture with the sound quality, right, and the amount of echo. And in this animal hospital, for example, they had a really bad echo problem in their new building. So they didn't really want to have this generic hidden sound absorption. They wanted something a little more artistic. So we designed this whole mural with these materials, which again were pretty easy to manipulate, kind of cut into patterns and play with the shadows and the depth. So that's kind of how that got started. We did this giant mural at the hospital. I just finished a mural at Studebaker Elementary School, and then we're going to be doing one at the Wasilla Public Library. But these are really fun for me as well. I know it seems kind of like a departure from the paper, but to me they're really similar with the shadows, with the dimension, and all of those things. So that's kind of where I'm at now. But yeah, so when you look at this, I think Rachel was talking about this being a landscape. And I feel like whenever I do any of these paper sculptures, I sort of have two sort of environmental considerations with them. One of them sort of the internal environment, kind of whatever I'm thinking about or feeling, right? And then sort of this external, something in the world, maybe something in science I found interesting or learned, right? But I feel like I always have those two sort of access points that are tethering the piece to some sort of main idea, right? So with this piece, I had been reading this book by Tristan Gooley. He's a naturalist in the UK, and his work it's research-based, but it's also kind of folksy and kind of like based on natural observation and what you can discern from just your environment, right? So if you're out hiking, he gives you tips on how to judge distance, right, with perception. He gives you tips of like
Attention
whether...
museum patrons. The time is 5:45 p.m. and the Anchorage Museum will be closing in 15 minutes. Please stop by the museum store where sales help support the museum's mission, programs, and exhibitions. Once again, the time is 5:45 p.m. and the Anchorage Museum will be closing in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, part of this is the lungs are really squished at this point in the pregnancy, so it's not that I'm like so out of shape. I just honestly am trying to cope. So anyway, but yeah, so I was reading this book by Tristan Gooley, and in it I kind of ran across what he calls a glitter path, and that just kind of made me laugh because you think about unicorns and like glitter path is a scientific term, but it is the actual term for when you're looking at a body of water and you get that beautiful effect of the sun or the moon sort of making it shine, right? So the practical bit that he pulled out of that was saying that when you have a rough patch of water, that's when you'll see the widest area of light. And I just thought that was kind of a beautiful sort of parallel to the beauty that you can mine from struggle, right? Kind of the most light in the roughest patch of water. And so that was kind of my starting point for this. And then sort of that internal thing that I was navigating is sort of represented in color, I would say. So on the color wheel, you have red and green at like complete opposite ends of your color wheel, right? And so that was sort of the area with the most tension for me, the rough water. And at the time, what I was navigating was sort of like this idea of maybe like the feminine and the masculine, and sort of how to assert myself, and sort of feeling at odds with expectations in society, with my work, in the sphere of motherhood, and kind of figuring out how to be my authentic, normal self, but also kind of fight for the things that were important to me and, show some assertiveness, which I'm not so good at, so. So that was kind of the tension at the start, and then the idea was that once you break out of kind of the imposed frame, the colors sort of work their way around the color wheel and meld by the end, right? So you have this peaceful, narrow strip of light by the end. Does that make sense? Anyway, that was my thinking. So, but yeah, so I think that's about it. I can answer some process questions if you have any with this piece, but these are all found materials. I'll tell you a little about those in a minute when we do the Q&A. But yeah, I think after, it's been almost 10 years since I really tried to pursue art in any sort of not at home, hidden away fashion. 10 years of sort of figuring out this balance between teaching, which I do still love and I still do, and motherhood and art. And I think for a while I felt like I had to be boxed in on one of those to be successful, right? I think you feel this pressure from the world to specialize, right? To be a sculptor, or be a teacher, or just be a mother. And so for me, those three things, they really feed each other. I feel like I make better art when I'm also teaching. I feel like I make better art when my kids are there with me and not, in a studio somewhere. I've tried all these things. So I think that's all I have to offer. I'm gonna take a break and have a drink of water, but if you have any questions, I'd love to hear. If you don't mind putting the little felt pieces back here, that would be great. So yeah, did you have any questions about this piece in particular and the materials, or?
So have you colored yourself or you use colors?
Yes, okay, so that's a great question. Do you have any guesses what this material is? So again, it's a found material. It was something that was going to waste. Any guesses what it might be? What'd you say?
Paper shop.
Yes. Okay, so you are spot on. So, and it feels a little bit like a punk move, right? To put a paper sculpture made of paint chips in a museum showing. But I feel like it's a found material, and I did some research with this stuff, and it's pretty interesting. So, it's actually not latex paint. You think what they would do is just take the paint and put it on strips of paper, right? So what it is, it's like a lacquer, like nail polish, so that it doesn't warp the paper underneath. And it's this big hidden manufacturing process. They make millions of these every day. And then what they do is they end up changing names or discontinuing colors. So they just have these massive piles of these going to waste, which is fascinating. A friend of mine, her husband, had this big corporate set of them. I'm talking like a box this big with booklets this thick, like 8 of them. And she said, we don't have any use for these. They're just going in the trash. And so these are hand cut. I just kind of chopped them up, right? And there are some pieces in here that aren't that material. There's some pieces of like a matte plastic that really worked with the sculpture that are in there too. But that's what the material is, yes, like paper. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Other questions? You what?
How long did it take?
Oh, I don't know. You could probably answer that question better than I I'm not sure. I mean, and the thing is, again, when you're kind of rotating these different roles, that's the nice thing too, is you can sort of put it down, step away, come back to it. I guess consecutively, I would say it took maybe a month. If I added the time together, hours, I don't know. I'd have to really think about that, Oscar. I'm not sure. Thank you for that hard question. All right. Any other questions about the materials or the piece?
So I guess I got a question.
Yeah.
So based on your backstory, and we were kind of talking about small towns in USA.
Yes.
And now you're using non-traditional materials in a non-traditional way. Is this like an act of rebellion from your upbringing, or because it's like spilling out of the frame?
Yeah. No, I really like that. I wouldn't, honestly, I've never felt this sense of I really haven't, which is really boring. I haven't felt this sense of rebelliousness with my art. If anything, do you know what I feel? I feel that I'm rather ignorant when it comes to art, since it wasn't my chosen career path. And I think in some ways that has served me in the sense that I don't feel so constrained by the mediums, and I feel really free to explore. I kind of have that nothing to lose sort of feeling, right? So with this piece, I really just let it roll with those two sort of things tethering me, which was kind of what I was processing emotionally, but also over here was, hey, I read this cool thing about a glitter path, and here's a bunch of them in Alaska, and then, right, so I don't really feel like it was especially rebellious. With spilling out of the frame, it was really that feeling for me of reconciling the struggle with those things that were in conflict at the time. Does that make sense? Yeah, good question. Yeah. Other questions?
I have one that I sent in advance.
Okay.
Whenever we have artists talking, I like to ask what they read, watch, listen to outside of their art practice, kind of from a cultural perspective. Do you have any books, podcasts, music, TV shows?
Yeah, so I do have, there's a podcast, have you heard of 99% Invisible? It's sort of an architecture design podcast, but I find it really fascinating. And again, it's this idea of these processes that are sort of hidden from us on the day-to-day. But I really recommend it. There's some really good stuff in there. Let's see, so you said other types of media, right?
Well, that's okay. Unless there's another thing you want.
I'm trying to think. So the other thing lately that I kind of stumbled upon, because you might notice, so those installations that I'm doing, they're massive, like big, all across the room things. And then I'm making some tiny pieces like the ones we passed around, right? So I've been thinking a lot about scale. And I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary, it's really short, it's great. It's from 1970s, 77 maybe, by a couple, the Ames couple. What is it called? It's called 10%, The Power of 10? Power of 10? Anybody heard of that? But it's this really simple thing, right? It basically zooms way in on something and then takes you all the way out to like space and then takes you back in. But the idea is that you multiply by 10 each time. But the idea that, scale is so relative and that being intimidated by these giant projects, it's really the same as approaching a small piece. You're really trying to kind of convey your message, right? And create a piece that is subliminal. And so, I don't know, those two things kind of spoke to me, I guess, recently.
Powers of 10.
Yeah, is that it? Okay, thank you.
Grace Choi is a painter based in Anchorage. Originally from South Korea, her practice considers concepts of self-discovery, identity, and the power of art. She observes and studies daily life and the atmosphere of Alaska, creating art that captures the intimacy between humans and nature, nostalgia, and a sense of comfort. And we are going to turn this format on its head. English is not Grace's first language, and so instead she prepared some notes and words, which she has kindly trusted me to say on her behalf. So I'm going to read for about 10 minutes some words that she prepared, and then afterward we will do a Q&A, and she has a translator who is here to help her as well if there is anything that she needs some support on. So I'm saying this in third person, but it is all Grace's words. Let's get to the first page. Grace thanks everyone here today for coming to see her painting. As an artist who immigrated from Korea to Alaska, her story is filled with self-identity and passion for art. Here is a short story about her life and her art-making journey. Grace Choi used to mainly do abstract art, but after participating in the 2022 Alaska Biennial here at the Anchorage Museum, she began working on more realistic and traditional paintings. Just last year, her paintings were in 2 solo exhibitions, and she's looking forward to many more opportunities to come in the future. Grace was immersed in abstract art for a long time, experimenting with variations of paint, materials, and the constantly evolving nature of painting itself. Her abstract journey has always been rooted in the reality that lives in a temporary space in the not-so-temporary, infinitely moving time. During her early childhood, Grace experienced the death of her mother, which has caused several philosophical questions about one's purpose, human existence, and the longing and yearning for lost time that cannot be brought back or returned. Her abstract paintings grew out of this experience. Essentially, abstract art to her is a process of exploring how the results of paint can change from moment to moment over time. Abstract art is the idea of remaining in a liminal space, focusing on the properties of the material and the natural results that appear over time from overlapping, sprinkling, or spilling different paints and tools on different mediums. The effects of chance and change. Recently, while working on realistic paintings, Grace has been fascinated by the world of traditional brushstroke paintings, and in her latest work has refrained from her previous research and experimentation, and is concentrating more on drawing, using colors created by mixing brushes and palettes and painting pictures that are created by what is and what will be. This practice is also related to shifts in her personal life. After getting married, having children, and living as an immigrant, Grace began to share more subjective and realistic perspectives in her art, thinking about the changes in her artistic practice and the events that occurred in her life that got her there. She thinks modern, pop, or abstract art is a type of art that strongly promotes the idea that anything we can see can be considered art. And while she agrees with this phenomenon and highly admires this type of conceptual art, sometimes she worries that over time, traditional painting and painters will become more concealed and distanced. Grace highly values painting as a form of direct expression from the artist's hands, something that not only conveys thought and meaning, but is also approachable and relatable. Her goal with her art is to evoke feelings of comfort and nostalgia, rather than solely being centered around abstract or niche topics that might be harder for a wide audience of people to connect with on a personal level. To her, it is crucial to balance intellectualism, emotional resonance, and empathy in art, to be able to make it accessible for all types of people, no matter their background, their experience, or where they're from. Grace's previous works were about the endless philosophical questions of human existence that arose from someone's death. Today, her paintings signify the vivid joy and mystery of living a newer and changed
Attention
life.
museum patrons. The
We'll
time
pause
is
for a
6
moment.
p.m. and the Anchorage Museum is now closed. Once again, the time is 6 p.m. and the Anchorage Museum is now closed. Thank you for coming, and we hope you visit again soon.
I'll repeat that. Today, her paintings signify the vivid joy and mystery of living a newer and changed life, starting from the day she opened her eyes holding a newborn baby in her arms, until now, where time and memories cannot be replaced, but will last a lifetime. She sees life as a series of temporary experiences that build up to eternity, the essence of painting and life. By using the simplest materials and embracing the movement of brush strokes, Grace's goal is to create art that appeals to the heart rather than the unknown and uncommon. This serves as a reminder of the depth of emotion that only humans can truly express, even in an age when modern technology and artificial intelligence is starting to sweep the realm of painting. And ultimately, Grace's art has become more of a personal journey for her, almost like going on a long journey and realizing that happiness is somewhere close by. These emotions reflect into the landscape and the people around her and become the main subjects of her paintings. Her creative process lies along the lines of realism, capturing the tangible elements of canvas and materials and the intangible concepts of time and space. Grace's paintings mostly feature Alaskan landscapes, people, and everyday moments that have deep meaning to her. She has always been fascinated by the light that shines in the ordinary, mundane moments of life. In her paintings, familiarity is crucial. The feeling of home is significant. It's the kind of painting where people will take one look and think, oh, I've been there before, and call their friends or family over to recall specific memories from that place and time. In some ways, this is also a projection of her desire to visit a foreign land and explore what's to come. This painting, which is titled House Between Trees, was completed in 2023. Grace personally built and prepared the canvas herself and then painted with acrylic paint. She mainly takes photographs of her inspirations with her camera and then transfers them onto her tablet for reference. She then looks at the photos and draws while remembering the places. When she draws, she usually changes the size of the canvas according to her concept. This canvas looks square, but it isn't. The sizing is more like 55 inches by 51 2/4 inches. Sorry, 1/4 inch. This was intentional as it psychologically seems to give a more homey and comforting feel. Nowadays, Grace isn't able to prepare her own canvases anymore due to having a frozen shoulder, so she buys them from the art store. The paints she uses are acrylic and oil paints, and the choice varies depending on the painting. She chose acrylic paint for House Between Trees because there are a lot of details. Please feel free to get closer if you'd like to look at them. She wanted to be able to express the cold, clean air of Alaska, and acrylics tend to have more vivid colors. On top of that, they dry quicker, making them ideal for detailed paintings. To express the details of the trees and the cold air in the background, the sky had to be treated more simply. As you can see, the sky is expressed in a jade color without a single cloud, and the shadows of the snow are bluish, hoping to give the feeling of Alaska's clean air. As Grace was going out to take pictures, the moment she saw this house and this tree, she knew it was the scene that she was looking for. The house stimulated her nostalgia, and the big tree appeared as if it contained a story that only old things can keep. The intertwined shapes were like our lives, and they told stories with the house. Grace feels that she didn't find this landscape found her. She also thought that the two women in the foreground of the painting were connected to each other while looking at their cell phones, and thinks that many people remember the street while visiting the Triennial exhibition. It has been a great pleasure for her to see how it strikes memories and conversations from people. She has heard many people say that they've seen this house before, and I have too. From starting the preparatory drawings and sketches, it takes about 2 weeks to more than 3 months to finish. If you include the time for taking pictures, planning, framing the canvas, and preparing the base, it takes much more time. Adding the varnish and framing, it adds up to several months to do one painting. Grace usually prepares several canvases at once, looks at the photos she took, plans the work, applies gesso all at once, and sketches in advance to keep the time frame as productive and short as possible. Even then, it still takes a very long time. While working on one task, Grace sometimes works on another task while the paint dries. When the work is finished, it is usually treated with a gloss varnish to obtain a more vivid color and also for preservation. This makes it feel like the details are more alive in the final stage. Once the varnish is completely dry, Grace finishes it off with a frame to protect the finished painting and canvas. When taking the photograph for this painting, Grace noticed that one woman was an out-of-state visitor and the other was simply out for a walk in the neighborhood. The traveler was asking for directions and they were checking their phones for a while. The conversation between these two people was symbolic, as was the tree standing in the background. Even when drawing, Grace enjoys adding her own stories to her photos to express her longing and nostalgia. House Between Trees took Grace a little over 3 months. When she paints for a very long time, she feels lonely. And to fight against the loneliness, she likes to create her own stories about the photos and talk to herself during the process. It not only keeps her engaged, but inspires her even more. The subject of home has appeared many times in Grace's work due to its nostalgic nature. Everyone has their own version of home, and each home consists of its own memories, whether it is a real home or an imaginary home. The peace and harmony found in the intimacy between humans and nature also inspires Grace. Whether it's a family hike or a drive into the mountains, a shared glance, a soft touch, or a moment of silence, these are the type of moments that speak volumes without words. Grace hopes that her work can inspire people, strike empathy, spark conversation, and serve as a platform to encourage others to share their own stories. Thank you, Grace, for those words.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to me talk. I will pass it over to Grace now for the
She will
Q&A.
show her process of painting, and she took picture every stage of her painting.
근데 이거는 너무 이 작품 처음인데 스케치한 거를 제가 못
But she
찍었어요.
forgot to take
너무
picture of her
너무
sketch.
막 그리고
She was
싶어가지고
eager to draw and paint through it, so it's her process.
하나 끝나고 하나 하지 않고 다 한꺼번에 계속 만지는 스타일을
So
쓰고
she
있어요.
doesn't go step by step, finishing one spot and the other, but she goes all as a
together.
whole, all together.
그래서 컬러가 조금 더 바이레이션이 잘 될 수 있도록
So that the color can come out as she wishes as a variations.
이게 투 스텝 그리고 다음 스텝이거든요.
So next step,
or 이거보다는 그 나무가 많이 없고
so let's
여기
complete it then this one.
디테일이 그다음에 그 나무를 그리면서 이 밑에 있는
And then while drawing the trees, branches, and she's doing on the floor.
근데 이 밑에를 그리다 보니까 이 사람들 다리가 없어졌어.
As you see,
처음에
the legs disappear like in the fog
Yeah.
while she's coloring the
see?
snow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
제가 이제 more 내추럴하게 그릴 수가 있으니까.
so that she can paint more natural.
그다음에 여기 디테일 snow detail and more details for tree.
She developed more details on the snow and the tree branches.
그다음에 조금 더 완성이 됐어요.
And you can see the difference.
And then more snow에
Just focusing on the snow
snow.
now.
그다음에
Now you can see the legs.
그다음에 이 스노우의 디테일을 더 그리기 시작했어요.
And then she's focusing on the snow colors.
그리고 여기가 더
And then more branches, like the completed part.
스노우 밟은 차.
Then there is a footstep on the snow too.
그 다음에 이 사람들이 어디서 왔는지 그걸 나타내기 위해서 여기에 more.
And then she's trying to trace where they came from.
그리고 이제 마지막.
And this is the end. Like this
월 색깔을
final.
조금 보고 그 다음에 마지막 바니쉬처럼
And she's
This is my
varnish.
studio.
So
그
there's
바니쉬
finishing job.
그리고 난 다음에 이제 바니쉬 처리하는
And then is the video clip of her varnishing paper.
그 다음에 애프터 바니쉬 한 다음에 액자만
And then she's making French book.
스튜디오에서 이거를 직접 촬영을
And then she took pictures.
프로페셔널 스튜디오에서 피처를 촬영하고 촬영하는 과정. 그러면 all done.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Are you happy with your studio space?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
저기 굉장히 처음 시작할 때는 너무 작은 스튜디오에서 시작했어요.
she started with a very
Small room. My husband there. 아주머니 큰 스튜디오를 마련해 줬어요.
And then he got a house that has
We have,
studio.
my house has a basketball court. No, it's a racquetball court. So I should, I'm a handball player.
그거 얘기하시-
She using for. So now she's using
그런 얘기는
it's pretty good size.
Yeah,
It looks like it.
yeah. So
I should have used handball court, but
yeah. Any more questions?
I don't want to use it.
I do have another question. So you said you transitioned from abstract to more realism now. Do you ever, for fun, go back to abstract, or do you feel pretty?
지금
추상화에서
그래서
이걸
그걸 하는데
다시 하고 싶어요.
추상화도 지금 가끔 하고 있어요.
Yeah, she does sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Just curious.
When you're out and about, are you actively looking for things to turn into paintings, or is it serendipitous that you happen to come across something?
그러니까 의도적으로 그런 마인드를 찾으시는지 아니면
어.
그냥 가다가 이거다라고 생각하는지.
약간 가다가 이것도 찾지만 의도적으로 찾는 거예요.
It's both ways. Sometimes she has an intention,
그러니까-
sometimes just see, oh, it is what I
Yeah. 그림을 그릴 때 생략할 수도 있고 그거 설명했어요.
Because she can omit some of the part that
아니,
realistic.
yeah. 그리고 조금 더 추가할 수도
to
있는데
make it what she
나는
wants.
있는
She can
그대로
add or omit.
있는 그대로를 그리는 거를
But she wants to paint exactly what it is.
yeah, looks like a postcard because 그거 저기 아까 얘기한 것처럼 마인드가 우리가 항상 보는 거 우리가 자꾸 디퍼런한 거를 추구하잖아요. 그거를 그 디퍼런한 걸 추구하는 거를 나는 좀 자제하고 싶다라는 표현.
She wants to refrain from creating something different from the fact and the realism, but she wants to create something that is there, the realistic art. So sometimes it comes, sometimes she has some intention. Both ways.
I'm going to ask do you have any book, podcast, TV show, movie recommendations?
Yeah, I already yeah.
She-
book is
Yeah, she gave me 3 books. One book is Sapiens by Yuval Harari, and the other one was Jean Garard's Theory of Desire, and the third one was Bernard Werber tree. So these all books are about human beings. So she has an imagination, and she has a lot of interest in human interaction and nostalgia.
will be in.
And then while watching Polar Express with her children, she has more interest and moved by the process of the movie by herself. And this day, Miyazaki, his art is really inspired. And she thinks that his mind is similar to hers.
Kerry Tasker is our final presenter of the night. He is an editorial, commercial, and fine art photographer located here in Anchorage. His photography is inspired by a deep interest in the strange vastness of Alaska, the Alaskan environment, and the people who call it home. He holds a BFA in photography from Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland, Oregon. Over to you.
Okay. I'll try to keep it quick because we've all been standing for a while. So the title is called Cloud Chamber, and then as a direct reference to what I'm trying to recreate. So how many of you know what a cloud chamber is? So there used to be one in the museum. It's a box, it's a scientific instrument that's filled with this gas, and if you put something that is radioactive next to it, you see the particles light up in the gas. So you see these crazy lines coming off that you couldn't see otherwise. And that is my main inspiration for this. I'm a huge, I'm pretty obsessed with glaciers and how they change. And I was thinking about, well, what if they changed, like instead of evaporating, what if it was like radioactive? And what if we could see that? And so this process was all about how do we create like a sort of surrealist thing of the glacier moving and changing. So that's the main inspiration for that. I'm trying to think of I guess I could go into the process too. So this was for this particular piece, this was a drone with a light on it. And it's a 30-second exposure with the drone shooting straight up. It took about 2 days to get this right. So this is out at Portage. I went twice to get the line right and to get the sky right and everything else. And it's a long, extensive process to make it work perfectly. But yeah, I think I'm going super fast here. So, any questions?
What time of day?
This was probably 1 in the morning.
So you're saying the drone was on the ground or shining down?
So the light of the drone is pointed directly at camera,
Okay.
and it starts about 4 feet off the ground and shoots up to about 400 feet.
And were you surprised by the results, or is this sort of what you were expecting?
So, no, I've been doing this for about 6 years now. The Cloud Chamber is an ongoing series where I've been using a drone light, I've been using road flares, I've been using like emergency shooting flares, whatever I can get my hands on that looks cool. So yeah, then that's what this process is. And also, I had a friend walk down right where this light is and pop a flash a few times, and that's what's lighting up the glacier. And he popped the flash directly at camera to add more pop. And then I flew the drone right from where he was straight up and down.
Okay, that was going to be my question. Was the drone moving from the ground up, or was it just the light? But you're telling us the drone was moving with the light and it's capturing.
Yes, the drone is
capturing
attached
that.
to the light.
Okay.
It's a duct taped
Gotcha.
apparatus I put
Okay.
together once I get out there. But yeah, that is.
How far from where you're standing with the camera to where the drone launched from?
That's a good question. I'm pretty far away. This is probably a 50-foot wall of ice right here, so we're probably a couple of 300 or 400 feet away, maybe.
So you caught most of that 400-foot drone going up?
Yes. And it took multiple exposures of going back and forth and stitching it together in Photoshop.
So a lot of work. How many people together? Cooperate, yeah.
Normally it's just me,
You.
unless I can drag someone out to help me.
Uh-huh.
But most of the time it's just me by myself. Yeah. So I'll set the camera up, and I'll guess an exposure, and I'll set a time lapse with the camera, and then I can operate the drone and time it back and forth. And with the light on the drone, you get about 10 minutes of flight time, so
Wow.
back and forth. Yeah.
Can I ask about your background in photography too? Kind of how your evolution maybe, so what your subjects that you're looking at?
Sure, yeah. I started out, I've had a few other series that are similar to this. It's a lot of backlighting and using road flares. Before I had the drone and the flying light, we were doing a lot of stuff in caves. Up in the Chugach, we found a couple of caves. And a lot of fireworks. But I love like the spontaneity that these lights can produce. Like you don't always know like what the light's going to do or how it's going to interact, and those technical questions are I find really exciting. So.
Do you find you prefer winter then in the dark to explore and experiment more
Yes.
than in the summer?
Yeah, I physically can't do this during the summer. It's too bright out for the drone to work, so I have to do it at night. During the flare. Yeah, and this is also a full moon, which is lighting up the top of everything, which actually helped a lot. But yeah, this is an ongoing series that probably gonna work on this for a couple more years.
Portage is relatively accessible in the sense that you can drive to it if it's icy and there's not a glacier cabin, you can walk to the lake. I was talking to one of my colleagues about this. She wasn't able to join tonight, but she was saying how what she really loves about your photographs is that they capture the moment and give you the feeling of being there, even if you weren't there. You refer to this strange vastness of Alaska. Are you hoping with your photographs that you'll inspire people to get out there, or is it more to share what you've seen?
Yeah, I don't know about inspiring people to get out. That's great if they want to do that, but no, I'm trying to capture the environment with like just a hint of otherness, like a little bit of strangeness, like a little bit of abstractness. And yeah, my goal isn't to inspire, it's to make my own thing. But if it does, that's great. But I don't want that responsibility of.
I think I heard this from Victoria, so she may have told you. But for everyone's information, this photograph is used on the exhibition's webpage. It's a great piece of art, but also by virtue of being horizontal, it really works with our website format. So we were excited when this was one of the pieces selected by Mary because perfect for the website. And an ADN reporter was here, I think it was from her, and she mentioned she was talking to someone and they saw that this was the main image for the exhibition, and they thought that the whole triennial was about aliens in Alaska. So it's working.
Okay,
It's definitely
all right.
conveying the weirdness and the unusualness.
I'll take it. Sure. Yeah, that's funny. But no, that's obviously open to interpretation. I'd love to try and make something that's not immediately recognizable. In the sense, and so I go to a lot of this, like this is Portage. I don't tell people this is Portage unless they ask, because the specific place I don't think is important more than like the sense of place. like I'm not trying to take a photo of Portage. I'm trying to take a photo of like glacier with the abstract nature of the light. Yeah.
If there aren't any other questions, any books, podcasts, TV show, movie recommendations?
You know, my life right now, I have, we just got a third kid, and I have not been listening or watching or reading a whole lot lately. When I do, I really love like 1970s and 80s science fiction books. They're like pulpy and just easy to read, but they're like full of wacky ideas, and, like psychedelic situations and stuff. But other than that, I don't know.
Well, thank you.